There's a quote most people hear once, nod it politely, and move on from. It sounds dramatic, maybe even exaggerated, like something meant for philosophers or tortured artists, not someone trying to survive deadlines, bills, and expectations. But some lines don't disappear after you hear them. They wait. They sit quietly in the background until life places you in the exact moment where they stop being words and start being instructions. The worst enemy you can meet will always be yourself. That sentence isn't poetic, it's diagnostic. Because when progress stalls, when doors don't open, when effort doesn't translate into results, when it feels like you're pushing uphill while everyone else glides past, your instinct is to look outward. Almost automatically, you begin assembling a list. The boss who doesn't recognize your value, the competitor who got lucky, the friend who didn't show up, the system that feels rigged, the timing that never seems right. And once that list forms, something else ignites. Anger, fire, determination. You tell yourself you'll prove them wrong. You'll outwork them. You'll show them. That fire feels powerful. It feels like momentum. But here's the line that flips the entire battlefield. One most people never stop to examine. When counting your enemies, count yourself twice. Not as an insult, not as shame, as strategy. Because when you slow the story down, when you rewind the exact moment things slipped, you rarely find the enemy striking from the shadows. You find something quieter. You find hesitation. You find overthinking. You find half-effort disguised as caution. Picture it clearly. You're standing in a moment that matters, a meeting, a conversation, an opportunity. Across from you is someone confident, relaxed, almost casual. They step forward and say what you were already thinking. They claim the idea you were circling. The room responds instantly. Attention, validation, momentum. Your chest tightens, heat rises, your jaw clenches. Anger spikes. Your mind reacts fast. I'll get them next time. They don't even deserve that. Now rewind. Slow it down. Watch the moment just before they step forward. You paused. You reread your notes. You thought, let me tighten this one more time. You waited for the right moment. That pause, so small it felt harmless, wasn't neutral. It was decisive. They didn't steal the win. You created the opening. That's what count yourself twice actually means. Yes, external resistance exists. Competition exists. Systems are imperfect. People disappoint. But your internal resistance doesn't just oppose you once. It hits you twice. First, it stops you from acting. Second, it allows the opportunity to move on without you. That's the double damage. And the most dangerous final is that it rarely looks dramatic. It looks reasonable. It sounds logical. It feels responsible. It convinces you that you're being careful, thoughtful, mature. Over time, that restraint compounds into something else entirely. Self-sabotage. Not because you're broken, because you're human. You're wired to protect yourself, to avoid embarrassment, to minimize risk, to preserve your identity. Blaming the outside world helps with that. It keeps the story clean. It keeps you justified. But it also keeps you stuck. Because the hardest truth, the one most people never fully face, is this. Most losses don't come from what happens to you. They come from what you hesitate to do for yourself. This is where the mirror enters the story. And looking into it is uncomfortable. The first thing it reveals isn't loud, dramatic self-hatred. It's something much quieter. Doubt. Not the kind that screams, you're not good enough. That's obvious. Easy to identify. The dangerous kind is subtle. It dresses up as patience. It sounds like preparation. It whispers, not yet. Let me show you how this actually plays out. There's someone like you, capable, skilled, respected, not new, not unqualified. The next step they want isn't a fantasy. It's logical, earned. But inside their head, a loop runs quietly. You're not ready. They'll see through you. Just wait one more cycle, so they prepare, and prepare again. They refine, they tweak, they practice alone. They tell themselves they're being smart, strategic, responsible. Weeks pass, then months, and one day the opportunity is gone. The role is filled. Someone else stepped into it. someone with less experience, less depth, less vision. And the worst part isn't jealousy, it's recognition. They know exactly where they froze. And that's doubt counting twice. First, the voice that questioned readiness. Second, the inaction that let the moment expire. Doubt doesn't just steal opportunities, it erodes self-trust. Every time you don't show up, a small part of you learns not to rely on yourself. Confidence doesn't disappear suddenly, it leaks, and soon the internal story shifts. Maybe I'm not leadership material. Maybe I'm better where I am. That's how the loop tightens. Here's the brutal truth most people avoid. Doubt doesn't go away by thinking harder. You cannot reason your way out of a feeling that survives on uncertainty. The only thing that interrupts doubt is movement. Not reckless action, not blind confidence, just decisive motion. The shift isn't dramatic. There's no lightning bolt. The question simply changes. Instead of asking, am I ready? You ask, what's ready enough? Not perfect, not bulletproof. Enough. That single reframe changes everything. Because confidence doesn't come before action, it follows it. And once you understand that, the mirror stops being an enemy. It becomes a guide. But it's not finished with you yet. Because when doubt loosens its grip, another trap steps forward. One that disguises itself as discipline, excellence, and high standards. And that's where things get even more deceptive. Once doubt loosens its grip, you expect relief. You think movement will feel lighter now, cleaner. And at first it does. You speak sooner. You raise your hand. You stop waiting for permission that was never coming anyway. That's when the enemy adapts. Because self-sabotage is intelligent. When it can't stop you with hesitation, it tries to slow you down with control. This is where perfection enters. Perfection doesn't feel like fear. It feels responsible. It feels professional. It feels like caring deeply about the outcome. That's what makes it dangerous. On the surface, it looks like a virtue. But perfection has a hidden cost. It replaces momentum with maintenance. It replaces progress with polishing. It replaces courage with control. And it almost always sounds reasonable. Just one more tweak. You've seen this play out before. There's someone like you, talented, sharp, capable. Ideas come easily. Patterns connect quickly. People respect their taste. Early drafts impress. Conversations start strong. But their projects follow a familiar arc. Strong beginning, slowing middle, quiet stall. There's always one more adjustment, one more revision, one more pass that promises to make it right. Deadlines creep closer. Messages sit unread. Not because they don't care, but because they don't want to send something that isn't their best. They tell themselves they're protecting their reputation. What they're really protecting is comfort. This is perfection counting twice. First, the ideal that keeps moving the finish line. Second, the opportunities that expire while the work stays hidden. Perfection doesn't ruin your work. It hides it. And unseen work doesn't compound. It doesn't attract feedback. It doesn't build trust. It doesn't create momentum. It just sits there, quietly convincing you that you're almost there. Meanwhile, the world moves on. Clients stop following up. Timelines close. Opportunities go elsewhere. Not because the quality wasn't there, but because reliability always outperforms brilliance in the long run. Here's the uncomfortable truth most high performers resist. Finished beats flawless. Not once, every time. Perfection thrives in isolation. Progress thrives in exposure. The shift doesn't come from burnout or failure. It comes from a rule. When something reaches functional completeness, not emotional comfort, it goes out. Not because it's perfect. Because reality sharpens faster than imagination ever will. The first time you do this, it feels reckless. Your body tightens. Your mind predicts criticism. But something unexpected happens. People don't attack. They engage. Feedback becomes specific, useful, energizing. Collaboration replaces guessing. The work improves faster in public than it ever did alone. And something deeper clicks. Perfection didn't protect your standards. It delayed your growth. Once that chain loosens, you think the path will clear completely. But another shadow steps in. One colder, quieter, and far more personal. Comparison. Comparison doesn't slow you down through effort. It slows you down through identity. You might recognize this one instantly. You have something solid, not a fantasy, something viable, thought through, ready enough. The conversation is scheduled. The door is right in front of you. And suddenly your mind fills with other people's lives, their success stories, their highlight reels, past failures replayed without context. What if this flops? What if they see through me? What if this is the moment I'm exposed? Fear doesn't rush you, it freezes you. This is fear counting twice. First, the imagined failure that paralyzes action. Second, the silent loss of the attempt itself. You tell yourself you're waiting for better timing, but underneath, it's something else. You're avoiding the emotional risk of being seen. Fear thrives on ambiguity. The longer you wait, the larger it grows. So the pattern changes, not emotionally, but structurally. Instead of asking, what if I fail? You ask, what happens after? You force the story to finish. Worst case, it falls flat. Then what? You learn what didn't land. You adjust. You try again, with more data than before. Fear shrinks when it's defined. Catastrophe loses power when it's spoken plainly. You step forward. The result isn't perfect. It's human. It's clear. And the room responds, not with rejection, but curiosity, engagement, questions. Even if it hadn't landed, something already changed. Fear didn't kill you. And once fear stops controlling you, momentum begins to build. But there's one more trap, one that drains energy quietly, even while it feels virtuous. Overgiving. This one wears a friendly face and you're dependable, warm, the person people trust. Being needed feels good. Being reliable feels like strength. Until slowly, almost invisibly, your own priorities shrink. Your workouts disappear. Your creative time erodes. Your goals slide further down the list. Not because you don't care, but because everyone else always seems to need you now. This is overgiving counting twice. First, constant outward output. Second, chronic self-neglect. Generosity without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. You tell yourself you'll get back to yourself soon, but soon never arrives. And eventually resentment shows up. Not toward others, but toward you. You're tired, not physically, existentially. The shift comes from one uncomfortable decision, a protected hour, 1 hour that belongs only to you. No explanations, no trade-offs, no negotiation. At first it feels wrong, selfish, even cruel. Then something unexpected happens. Your energy returns. Your patience improves. Your yeses feel cleaner because they're chosen, not automatic. Giving from fullness feels entirely different than giving from depletion. Boundaries don't push people away. They keep you intact. And now only one mirror remains, the final trap. Excuses. They never announce themselves as excuses. They arrive as explanations, circumstances, logic. Projects stall, deadlines slip, results disappoint. And there's always a reason. The system failed. The timeline was unrealistic. Other people dropped the ball. This is excuse-making counting twice. First, avoidance of responsibility. Second, the stagnation that follows. Blame feels relieving, but it steals authority, because if it's not your fault, it's not your power either. The shift is quiet but decisive. One question: what's my part? Not publicly, not dramatically, privately, honestly. You find one thing you could have done differently, one action you can take now. You take it, momentum returns. Because every trap operates the same way. They delay, they drain, they distract. And they all lose power the moment you see them clearly. The mirror isn't an enemy anymore. It's becoming a tool. And next, everything converges. How to turn this awareness into an edge. How to use inner resistance as fuel. And how to stop fighting yourself altogether. That's where real control begins. By now, the mirror should feel different. Not softer, not kinder, clearer. You've seen the pattern. Doubt freezes, perfection delays, fear paralyzes, overgiving drains, excuses deflect. Each one looked different, sounded reasonable, even felt intelligent. But underneath, they all ran the same play. They slowed you just enough for opportunity to pass. That's the real cost. Not failure, not rejection, not mistakes. Missed momentum. Once you see that, the question changes. It's no longer, how do I get rid of my inner enemy? That fight never ends. You don't delete instinct. You don't silence fear permanently. You don't outgrow doubt forever. The real question becomes, how do I turn the enemy into an edge? Because here's the truth most people never hear clearly. Your inner resistance exists for a reason. It isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to protect you using outdated rules. Doubt tries to prevent embarrassment. Perfection tries to prevent criticism. Fear tries to prevent loss. Overgiving tries to preserve belonging. Excuses try to protect identity. None of these instincts are evil. They're untrained. And untrained energy doesn't disappear. It misfires. So mastery isn't suppression, it's recruitment. This is where the meaning of count yourself twice finally locks into place. You don't double count yourself to punish yourself. You double count yourself because you carry more influence over the outcome than any external force ever will. Once you accept that, power returns immediately. Let's reframe what you've already seen, not to relive it, but to use it. When doubt appears now, you stop treating it like a verdict. You treat it like a signal. Doubt shows up right before expansion. It marks the edge of your current capacity. So the question changes. Not, am I ready? But what's ready enough? You act and let reality finish the sentence. Perfection stops pretending to be excellence. You recognize it for what it is, fear-wearing structure. Real standards respect time. They honor momentum. They understand that excellence is iterative, not private. So perfection becomes precision with a clock. You don't ship trash, you ship progress. Fear loses its mystery. You stop wrestling with it emotionally and start dismantling it logically. You force the story to complete itself. What's the worst case? And then what? Fear collapses when it's forced to finish the thought. Overgiving gets corrected, not erased. You don't become colder. You become sustainable. You give from overflow, not obligation. You stop abandoning yourself to earn approval. And excuses, the most seductive trap of all, lose their grip the moment you ask one question and actually answer it. What's my part? That question doesn't shame you, it activates you. It moves you from passenger to driver. And drivers don't wait for ideal conditions. They create motion anyway. Now everything converges because awareness alone doesn't change identity. Practice does. This is where the shift becomes permanent. At the end of each day, you perform one simple audit, not journaling, not reflection, command, 2 lines. First line, which inner enemy showed up today? Be specific. Doubt delayed my message. Perfection stalled my work. Fear kept me quiet. Overgiving drained my energy. Excuses avoided responsibility. Second line, how do I flip it tomorrow? Counting it twice. Prepared once, acted once. 80% ships. Worst case written, action taken. 1 protected hour, no exceptions. Name my part, take 1 corrective step. That's it. 5 minutes. But here's what changes. You stop being surprised by yourself. Surprise is what gives resistance power. When it appears unexpectedly, it feels overwhelming. When you expect it, it loses its teeth. This is what real flow looks like. Not the fantasy version, not endless motivation, not emotional ease. Flow is recognizing resistance early and moving anyway. You stop arguing with your instincts. You stop shaming yourself for having them. You start leading them. And slowly something profound happens. The mirror stops feeling hostile. It becomes informative. You no longer flinch when hesitation shows up. You recognize it as a cue. You don't panic when fear rises. You read it as a signpost. You don't spiral when you overgive. You correct course. You become self-led. And self-leadership is the real upgrade. Not confidence, not discipline, not motivation. Self-leadership. It's what separates people who almost live the life they want from people who actually do. External resistance still exists. It always will. But it no longer decides the outcome. Your response to yourself does. That's why the old wisdom endures. When counting your enemies, count yourself twice. Not because you're the problem, because you're the leverage. You're the variable closest to the decision, the force that moves fastest, the only enemy that can instantly become an ally. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for life to cooperate. You move first. There's one final shift left, one that turns all of this from insight into identity and momentum into a default state rather than a phase. That's where this ends. And that's where it really begins. Once you start moving first, something subtle but powerful happens. Life doesn't suddenly get easier. Resistance doesn't disappear. But the dynamic changes. You stop negotiating with hesitation. You stop asking permission from doubt. You stop waiting for confidence to arrive like it's a prerequisite. You act and then you adjust. This is where most people get confused. They think self-leadership means intensity, discipline, or relentless willpower. It doesn't. It means clarity under pressure. It means knowing what to do when your nervous system is activated and your instincts are screaming for safety. Because self-sabotage isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Your body is always trying to keep you alive, not successful, not fulfilled, alive. And it uses ancient wiring to do that. When uncertainty appears, your nervous system reacts before your rational mind ever enters the conversation. Heart rate shifts, breathing tightens, muscles brace, attention narrows. In that state, hesitation feels smart, delay feels safe, control feels necessary. So the next level isn't thinking differently, it's responding differently. You learn to read your body the way you read your thoughts. When tension rises in your chest, you don't label it fear. You label it activation, energy, readiness. When your breath shortens, you don't slow down mentally, you slow it physically. One controlled exhale tells your nervous system that you're not under threat. This isn't mindset, it's regulation. Because a regulated body gives you access to choice. An unregulated body defaults to habit. This is why people repeat patterns they intellectually understand, but emotionally can't stop. The insight is there. The physiology hasn't caught up. So you train it. Before difficult actions, you create a micro-ritual. Nothing dramatic, nothing performative. Feet grounded. Exhale longer than you inhale. Eyes forward, then you move. You don't wait to feel safe. You create safety through movement. Over time, your body learns something new. Action doesn't equal danger. Visibility doesn't equal rejection. Mistakes don't equal annihilation. And once the body learns that, resistance loses its physical grip. This is how momentum becomes natural instead of forced. But there's another shift happening beneath the surface, one that most people miss entirely. Your identity begins to update, not through affirmations, not through visualization, through evidence. Every time you act despite hesitation, you deposit proof. Proof that you can be relied on. Proof that discomfort is survivable. Proof that momentum responds to action. Identity isn't what you tell yourself. It's what you've watched yourself do repeatedly. This is why waiting for confidence never works. Confidence is a conclusion, not a starting point. Your nervous system doesn't believe words, it believes patterns. And your pattern is changing. You're no longer someone who pauses indefinitely. You're someone who notices resistance and moves anyway. That's not bravado, that's trust. Trust built through behavior. And once trust forms internally, external friction matters less. Opinions lose their weight. Setbacks lose their sting. You stop personalizing delay and start optimizing response. You also stop romanticizing struggle. You realize something quietly liberating. Growth doesn't require suffering. It requires consistency under mild discomfort. That's it. Small actions. Repeated. Under tension. This is where people either overcomplicate or quit. So simplify it. One decisive action per day that used to feel heavy. Send the message. Submit the work. Have the conversation. Protect the hour. Name your part. You don't stack 10 habits. You stack one behavior, acting sooner than your old self would have. That's the metric. And something else emerges when you live this way. Time expands, not literally, but perceptually. Because procrastination collapses time into pressure, action opens it back up into space. You stop sprinting at the last minute. You stop living in reaction. You start operating from intent. And here's the quiet truth no one talks about. Most people aren't stuck because they're incapable. They're stuck because they've been practicing hesitation longer than action. You're reversing that practice. And the more you do, the less dramatic everything feels. Growth becomes almost boring, effective, grounded, real. This is when self-sabotage truly loses its grip, not because it's gone, but because it's outpaced. There's only one thing left now: integration. Turning this from something you understand into something you live, especially when no one is watching, when motivation is low, when old habits try to resurface. That's the final piece. At some point, you stop thinking of this as a technique. It becomes a way of operating. You don't wake up every day motivated. You don't need to. Motivation was never the engine. It was just the spark. What carries you now is something quieter and far more reliable. Self-trust. You've watched yourself act when it would have been easier to wait. You've seen yourself move under tension, speak before certainty, choose progress over polish, and your nervous system has learned what your mind always hoped was true. You can handle discomfort. That changes everything. Because once you know that, resistance stops feeling personal, doubt becomes information, fear becomes a signal, hesitation becomes a cue, not a command. You don't eliminate these things, you lead them. And leadership, real leadership, is calm. It's not aggressive. It's not loud. It's simply decisive. This is where self-sabotage quietly collapses. Not through force, through consistency. You no longer ask, why do I keep doing this to myself? You ask, what's the next clean action? And then you take it, even when it's small. Especially when it's small. Because small actions, taken early, prevent the need for heroic effort later. This is the shift most people miss. They wait for a breakthrough moment, something dramatic enough to change them permanently. But real change happens through repetition under mild discomfort. Day after day, choice after choice. You don't need to overhaul your life. You just need to interrupt the pattern. One hesitation noticed, one pause shortened, one decision made sooner. That's how identity updates. And eventually something profound becomes true. You stop fighting yourself. You stop wasting energy on internal debates that go nowhere. You stop negotiating with the part of you that wants to stay small, not because it vanished, but because it lost authority. You became the one in charge. This is why the mirror no longer feels threatening. It's no longer a place where you look for flaws. It's a place where you check alignment. Am I acting in a way I can respect? Am I moving when it matters? Am I keeping my word to myself? When the answer is yes, even imperfectly, momentum follows. Life responds to movement, not perfection, not certainty, movement. And once movement becomes your default, external obstacles stop defining your story. They become terrain, not walls. That's why the old wisdom still holds. When counting your enemies, count yourself twice. Not because you're broken, not because you're the problem, but because you're the leverage. You are the closest force to the decision, the fastest variable to change, the one element that can turn resistance into fuel instantly. Most people never learn this. They spend years waiting for clarity, confidence, or permission. You don't need any of those. You need follow-through. And if you've stayed with me all the way to this point, that already says something important about you. You don't turn away when things get uncomfortable. You don't avoid the mirror. You engage with it. That's exactly who this space is for. If this helped you see yourself more clearly, if something shifted even slightly, then don't let that momentum fade. Videos like this aren't meant to be consumed once and forgotten. They're meant to be revisited, layered, and applied as life pushes back in new ways. That's what this channel is built around. Not hype, not shortcuts. Just clear psychological insight and practical control, especially on the days motivation disappears. So if you want to keep sharpening this edge, stay connected. Like the video if it resonated. Share it with someone who's fighting themselves in silence. And subscribe, not for notifications, but to keep reinforcing the version of you that moves first instead of hesitating. You've already proven something important by being here. Now keep going. The moment you stop fighting yourself, very little can stop you at all. Top of form, bottom of form.